Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Allahumma salli wa sallim wa zid wa barik ala Rasulillah wa alihi athar wal an ala a'da'i Muhammadin min al-awwalin wal akhirin ila yawmiddin ya arhamar rahimin. Ikhwa wa akhwatu fillah, assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Greetings to all of you. I'm led to believe that we have individuals not only in England but outside of England also. So welcome to you. Thank you very much for making the effort to attend given the difference in time, as well as congratulations once again to Majlis Ulama Shia Europa for organizing this teacher training. It says a lot about the organization with regards to its commitment to not only spread education via Majlis and developing a wide range of resources for learners, but also to work to equip those who are engaged in the teaching process within the various madaris, wherever they are. It shows a commitment to aiding them in carrying out this very difficult but rewarding task. So that leads me on to my next comment, and that is my presentation lies within a number of presentations which I've given previously on assessment methods. And so it should be seen as a continuation. And where I locate the dialogue on assessment methods is firmly within what we would call teacher standards, if you recall. And I developed a line of thought which mentioned that teacher standards are those standards which we are expected to adhere to as individuals engaged in what we could call a faith-based emancipatory praxis, bringing theory into practice within the madaris itself. And so I guess our orientation, the way we teach, the philosophy within which our teaching is housed, the ethos which we propagate within our teaching, regardless of where that teaching takes place, is based upon a particular worldview. And that is a spiritual, faith-based, proactive worldview, which positions us as human beings as the khulafa, or the trustees of Allah Azza wa Jal. And one role of the trustee is to educate, is to impart knowledge. And as such, the knowledge which we are asked to impart within the blessed madrasa is a knowledge which I guess we could say is able to transform. It's transformatory knowledge. It is a knowledge which is able to transform a worldview, an understanding that the individual has, not only of themselves, not only of the community which they come from, not only their understanding of what Islam actually is and what Islam asks of them, but ultimately it's able to transform, it's able to enrich, it's able to give detail to the relationship which the individual establishes with the Shari Muqaddas, Allah Azza wa Jal. And so, having said that, it would mean that we as teachers within the various madaris, wherever they are, regardless of how long they've been in existence, regardless of the size that they are, regardless of the funding that they receive, regardless of the resources which they are able to engage with on a daily, on a weekly, on a 2-weekly basis to impart knowledge, it falls under a particular heading. It falls within a particular framework, and that is the work of the Anbiya and the A'imma Athar. So what I'm saying is that there is a clear sunnah, a clear way of teaching within Islam, which has been established since the time of the first prophet and continued all the way up until the last prophet. So from Nabi Adam alayhi salam, the first prophet, to Nabi Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wasallam, through the A'imma Athar alayhim salam ajma'een, there is a detailed, concise, clear manner of teaching within Islam, which is well established. And now what has been developing over the past, say, 20 or 25 or 30 years is that a lot of that material, which is initially in Arabic, it's in Farsi, is being translated into English. And now we are seeing many of the rich texts, which detail the pedagogy and the andragogy which Islam has developed within the framework of teaching, now being housed or now being put down in English. What is meant by pedagogy, I'm sure you all know. Pedagogy with regard to the teaching of children, what we could term as ta'limul adamiyya, and andragogy, the teaching of adults, what we could term as ta'limul ibrahimiyya, different ways of engaging learners. So my presentation is based upon this paradigm, or it falls within this paradigm, and I'm going to be presenting a few ideas on assessment methods. And I'm going to be looking at a particular assessment method as we go on. So really what I want you to do is first engage in a task with me, please. Okay, so I'm going to turn to the next slide. I've put together a few slides for us. Maybe I won't get through them all given the short space of time that I have at my disposal. But the first slide I want to share with you is all about questions, asking questions. Now, I find questioning is a very important part of my teaching. My teaching is split into maybe 3 different sections, all interlinking. That is teaching within the madrasa itself, teaching within the hawza itself, and then teaching within the university. And what links all, or one of the many themes which links all, is the sawal, the questioning. And we are told that ilm, knowledge, is in a khizana, and the miftah, the key for that khizana, is to question. So turning to my next slide, I've asked the question, how is assessment defined? How do we define assessment? So let me give you a brief introduction to assessment, and then I think the question can be answered, okay? So when we talk about assessment, sometimes we have the term tests, and I don't think the word test captures really what is intended by assessment. So when we assess something, we want to find out a number of features or characteristics associated with that thing. So let's take a number of examples from our daily lives. Let's say that we want to find out whether our children, if Allah Azza wa Jal has blessed us with children, that is, know how to perform their wudu. Or if we have a baligh daughter, Allah Azza wa Jalla has given us that barakah, then we want to know, does our darling daughter know how to put her hijab on? So 2 scenarios. One based upon wudu. Do our children know how to perform wudu? Correctly, obviously, according to Madhab Shia. And does our daughter or do our daughters know how to put their hijab on? We could go further and we could ask, well, is our son able to tie his shoelaces? These are all questions which we are asking, and the way we can find out about them is by assessing. So asking our children to perform wudu, to see whether if indeed they know how to perform the 2 washings and the 2 wipings correctly and in order, obviously. And then turning to the hijab, seeing whether our daughter or our daughters, if we have that extended barakah, know how to put the hijab on. And then likewise, seeing whether our children know how to tie up their shoelaces. So we assess almost every single day, almost every single hour of our lives. And there are 2 fields that we assess in. There is the everyday life assessment and there's the academic assessment. And this is where we are locating assessment. We are locating assessment within an academic framework. So obviously, what is required within the academic framework with regards to assessment is not the same as what is required outside of the academic framework. Although they are both assessment tasks, but they are attended with different rules, different aspects, etc. So the question is, how is assessment defined? How do we define assessment? I'm not saying my definition of assessment is the only one, nor am I saying that it maybe have brought clarity to your minds as to what assessment is. It may have confused you even more. But nevertheless, the question is to you, as a class, how is assessment defined? And I want to give you about 2 minutes to write down your thoughts, please, on this question. How is assessment defined? What is it? What are the words that you would use to capture the essence of assessment? If somebody were to ask you, just as I've asked you, how do you define assessment within an academic framework? Academic framework being the madrasa. What would you say it is? A parent comes up to you and says to you, Khanum or Agha, what do you mean by assessment? I don't understand. I want to help my child, but I don't really understand what you mean by this term assessment. Can you explain for me, please? You may be delivering knowledge based upon the Quran, so reading of the Quran. You may be delivering knowledge based upon fiqh. You may be delivering knowledge based upon tarikh, history, or akhlaq, ethics, or whatever subject, but you're asked by that parent who wants to assist their boy or their girl, what do you mean by assessment? Please explain for me. So I want to give you 2 or 3 minutes to write down your thoughts, and then we're going to feed back, and then bi'idhnillah, use that knowledge which you present to continue with the presentation. So over to you for 2 or 3 minutes. I'm seeing that a few of you are typing in the public chat. Thank you very much for that. Much appreciated. Carry on, please. And I will ask you to feedback using the microphone, if you don't mind. If you do mind, don't worry. But if you don't mind, it would be much appreciated if you could feedback your thoughts verbally, please. So far, we have about 4 responses, and I'm waiting for the rest of us to feedback. There are 19 of us in the class at the moment. So if we've got 4 people who have fed back, then we need another 15 responses. And if we're going to subtract myself, then we need 14 responses. Are you all typing away? I hope so. Let's see who we have. We have Martha, Sister Martha. I know you personally. She's all the way over in the Caribbean joining us. Must be very early for you in Trinidad and Tobago. I know you're on the island of Tobago. Our Sister Martha is one of the only Shia on that island, very active believer, a student of the Hausa here in London, and her husband has just undergone a very serious operation. So please, all the believers, do adiyah for his shifa, bi'idhnillah. We have Quran BQ01 double MP. Thank you very much. We have Khanum Bilqis Hamdani. Thank you very much. We have Agha Maytham Reva. Shukran Jazilan. We have Khanum Sakina Hamdani. Shukran Jazilan. We have Agha Said Hassan. Shukran Jazilan. And who else do we have? That's it so far. Where's everybody else? I can see so many names. Khanumi Masuma, are you there? Khanumi Rukhsana, are you there? Khanumi Sadia Nabeem, are you there? Khanumi Aisha, Asia Shah, Assalamu alaikum, are you there? Khanumi Yusra, Agha Ali Akbar Naqawi, Khanumi Safiya Salim. Where are your responses? We're waiting.
Assalamu alaikum, sir.
Alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Yeah. Assessment for me would be like comparing a child's knowledge at the beginning and then later on in during the week, or progressing, if the child is progressing or not, and then comparing the results from the starting to the end of the month or end of the year.
Oh, that's a really nice explanation. Who just gave that explanation, please?
This is Najma Zaidi.
Oh, fantastic. Really, really nice, very clear, very methodical. It seems that you've got method. So looking at where the learner is at a particular stage, it could be at the beginning of the academic year, it could be beginning of the module, and then over a course of time, looking at the learning which the student has engaged in, and then seeing what has been acquired.
And then we can actually we can also keep the expected and under expected targets. So we could check the child has reached the targets or not.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. So targets, we could say, are learning goals, maybe. Yeah. Okay. Thank you very much for that. And who else is going to feedback? We need more. We need more. So over to you. Okay. Let me ask then, Khanomi Farad Jafri, over to you. You can release the microphone. Over to you, please. No? Okay. Khanomi Yusreen, over to you. Do you notice I'm going to the people who are quiet and haven't actually typed anything? Over to you. No again. All right then. So let's go to let us go to Kara Haydari. Kara Haydari, the question is to you. How would you define assessment? Agha Mayfam, are your students here or are they?
Yes, yes, I am here.
Are they in Ghaiba? Are the students in Ghaiba? What's happened to them?
Yeah, it's a bit strange. Usually, the people you mentioned, I know them personally, and they are quite, responsive.
I
They're
think
not awake.
it might be because it's been a long day, and maybe they're juggling other things as well. So let's say Malish, no problem at all.
There's a response from brother Karar. So I think he has some issues with the mic, but he has responded in the chat.
Okay, thank you very much, Al Qara. No problem. Can I go to there is Sayyid.
Sheikh, can I just say
Hassan.
something?
Yes, please go ahead.
Assalamu alaikum, Sheikh.
Alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Yeah. I find one good way is there's like 3 levels, working towards, working at, and greater depth. So that's sort of how I try and assess them. Like I have a target in mind, and I see who's working towards the target. Sometimes you got students of every different level in the class, and some want more, so you give them something deeper. So that's that's one way of doing it.
And Khanwi Bilqis, that's very nice, because what you're building in here is you're building also differentiation. Notice the word which she mentioned. She mentioned, and some students need a bit more. And so once you've understood that within any given class that you are delivering, there are different levels of understanding within the class, then you can now begin to differentiate. And by differentiate, what is meant is that there are certain things expected from certain students with a knowledge base, and certain other things, maybe a bit more, expected from a student or a group of students with a particular knowledge base. Now, how do we ensure that we cater to the needs of both students within any one given session? And here now, differentiation comes into play. So the resources that we may be using with one learner, i.e. that learner who has a particular level of expectation, and another student who has a higher level of expectation, those learning resources which we are using are not the same, because the intellectual engagement with the knowledge is not the same. So to hold the attention of the student, to push the abilities of each individual student according to their strengths, needs to be taken into consideration. Thank you very much for everybody who has fed back so far. I'm just going to ask one more individual to feedback, and I'm going to ask, let's see, I had Sayyid Hassan. Aga Said Hassan, are you there? Can you feedback, please?
Regarding, Assalamu alaikum.
Alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Yeah, I, as I understand, when I ask for assessment, the assessment is whether, I mean, whether in my session the child has understood that that session, the idea behind that session, the different key points. And if, for example, if I have explained, or if I have a session which is related to some practical thing, for example, if it is namaz, for example, then the objective is that at the end of that session, the child knows, and he can or she can exercise those points which I have explained or I have gone through. So it is the knowledge. The first thing is the knowledge of those points, then understanding of those points, that I mean, like the child has understanding of those points, why they are there, or like for example, how it happens, and then the practical side of it, whether they can actually implement it or not.
Hassan, shukran very much, Said Hassan, for that. Can I go a bit further with you before we turn to the next slide? And let me try and convey what I have in my mind with regards to assessment. I mentioned that I teach in various locations, and I mentioned it for a reason. So when I teach in the madrasa, or when I teach in the hausa, or when I teach at university, and I'm quite fortunate because the settings which I teach in are all what we could say promoting an Islamic ethos, okay? So when I'm assessing, I'm not only looking for knowledge recall, okay? So for example, in the madrasa, it could be we're looking at Aqidah, and we're looking at, for example, the Rasuluddin. And let's say I'm asking the students, well, what are the Rasuluddin? And the students will respond, bi'idhnillah. The first is Tawheed, the second is Adl, the third is Nabuwa, the fourth is Imama, and the fifth is Ma'ad, or belief in the return after death. But anybody can do that. Even a non-Muslim can do that. Even an atheist can do that. So what makes the interaction between that knowledge that that student has just recounted different from the knowledge, let's say, that a non-Muslim would recount, would mention regarding what the Rasuluddin are? And there has to be something more. There has to be a spiritual connection also with that knowledge. And so my question is, how do we assess that? It can't just be a description. There has to be some quality. You know, we talk about quantitative and qualitative. Quantitative numbers, describing. The student has described something, but anybody can describe it. Quality, going further than mere description, going beneath the surface, analyzing, evaluating, comparing, and contrasting. How do we assess that? How do we assess the spiritual connection our learners have with a body of knowledge? And for me, this question has been going through my mind for over 30 years of teaching and engagement with learning. And I will not say that I have arrived at one overriding conclusion What I would say is that it changes with regards to every class that I teach. It changes with regards to every group of learners I engage in. So I want you to think about that, class. I want you to think about, how do we assess, or how do we come into, I think, a greater appreciation of the spiritual connection our learners are making with the knowledge that we are presenting to them. And why I'm not using the term assessing spirituality is because that's not our role. Our role is not to assess spirituality. Are we going to stand there and, ask questions concerning spirituality? That's not how spirituality, for me, is assessed or understood. Okay, so how do we come to an appreciation that not only our learners are able to recount how many Usuluddin there are, how many Furu'uddin there are, who is the first Imam, who is the sixth Imam, who is the eighth Imam, who is the 12th Imam, what are the surahs in the first Sapara, etc. Okay, but now we come to something which is much more richer in nature, and that is, how do we come into an appreciation as facilitators of learning regarding the spiritual connection our learners have made with that body of knowledge? And I think that's a challenge for us, because if we are able to do so, then I believe we are able to offer learning which is much more proactive and much more inclusive. Our learners may not be able to recount all the Furu'uddin, all the Usuluddin. They may not be able to give the correct makhraj for the pronunciation for Surah Al-Fatiha. Okay, they may not be able to understand those things, the Shakiyat Namaz. They may not be able to understand all of them, but ask them about how they bring meaning to their life, then they are able to go into detail. We need to find a way in which we can incorporate the spiritual connection our learners make in how we assess. And I think by doing so, our assessing will be much more inclusive, because it takes into consideration the diversity which is amongst our learning cohort. So moving on, I want to mention a few things, and I'm trying to close this conversation box. There we go. I can't see the slide myself. So assessment, what is it? As a part of classroom activities, is a fundamental process required to promote learning and ultimately achievement. Now, learning, again, I'm not talking about the ability to regurgitate a number of facts. For me, that's not learning. Learning is the ability not only to regurgitate those facts, but also to make contact or make links with those facts outside of those facts. Also, the ability to create a relationship with that body of knowledge, which opens up other avenues of knowledge as well. These other avenues of knowledge are, in fact, what I mentioned previously, that making contact, making links with other bodies of knowledge. So coming back to the example of the Usuluddin, looking at Tawheed, how does Tawheed relate to Adala? How does Tawheed relate to Nabuwa? How does Tawheed relate to Imama? How does Tawheed relate to Ma'ad? This is learning. Learning is not about solely describing. It's an ability to make links outside of the immediate body of knowledge with other knowledge. Okay, so assessment is crucial for us so that we, as those who provide access to knowledge, the ones who have the knowledge, the ones who are making bi'idhnillah knowledge acquisition possible, we have to have a clear understanding of what assessment actually is and how we are going to use it. If we don't have a clear understanding in our minds, and this is a particular point I want to make, there may be 20 of us in the class here right now, and each one of us has a different understanding of what assessment is. Personally, I would say that's valid. As long as you are clear as to what assessment actually is, and you are able to convey that understanding to your learners, I would say that understanding of assessment which you have is authentic, it is correct, it can be used. We are not one monolith, and we need to move away from this understanding that one idea or one perception, one understanding is correct. Because if we don't move away from that, we shut down innovation, we shut down movement, we shut down progress. And you as teachers are in an environment where you can create new knowledge, you can create new understanding. The madrasa is an entity which has come in for scrutiny for a number of reasons, okay? You as teachers within the madrasa, you are uniquely placed to now begin to write about your personal experiences. As teachers within the madrasa, you are uniquely placed to offer your advice to the madrasa as to how it can develop, how it can strengthen, how it can utilize certain resources which will assist learning across the madrasa. And learning here, I don't only mean with regards to the children who attend, but I also mean with regards to the teachers who attend. So if assessment is not clear in our minds, then that lack of clarity will filter down to those individuals we are charged with educating, bi'idhnillah. So here, learners need to know and understand the following before learning can take place. 1, what is the aim of the learning? Well, what do I do with it? Okay, so I'm learning about the Rasulallah. Then, what practical impact does it have on my daily life? I'm living in London. Well, and you're teaching me about the Rasulallah, and we've spent 5 sessions, so 1 hour on each of the asl, on each of the principles. But then what do I do with it? Okay, so what is the aim of the learning? That needs to be conveyed to the learners. The aim of this session class is, and now you go through your aims. Now, we know that there are associated terms with aims, for example, the objectives. So we talk about aims and we talk about objectives. The aims are for whom? And the objectives are for whom? The aims are for the teacher, the objectives are for the learners. What will the learners be able to do with this knowledge? What will the learners be able to do with the discussion, the detailed discussion you have entered into over the past 60 minutes related to Tawheed, regardless of their age. They could be 6-year-old, they could be 14-year-olds, but your aims are clear. So what is the aim of the learning? Why do they need to learn it? And in this day and age, we have learners who are exposed to, let's say, a wide variety of competing ideas, competing ideologies. So why do they need to learn it? I mean, what practical difference is it going to make in their lives? And here we need to be willing to open up to this a character within our class of question and answer, and be willing to accept that some of the answers we may not agree with. And if we are confident in our teaching, then we will welcome the questions that the students ask. And these questions may go to the very fundamental, to the root, the cornerstone of our belief. I can't see Allah Azza wa Jalla, so how do I know he exists? Well, why should I pray? Why should I wear hijab? You know, why should I fast? Well, what difference does it make for us? We need to be prepared for those questions, and we need to have a range of answers related to those questions. And the answers may not be accepted straight away. It may be a process whereby we're constantly revisiting questions and answers so that clarity, bi'idhnillah, is achieved maybe when the student leaves. Where are they in terms of achieving the aim? And how can they achieve the aim? Some of the questions that need to be clear in our minds before we can set assessment tasks. I would urge you, as professional madrasa teachers, because that's what you are, whether you teach one session a week, whether you are teaching 4 sessions, whether you've just started, remember this idea of going back to professional standards. You are professional madrasa teachers. You bring a professional ethos and character to the madrasa. And so part of your professionalism is understanding why you assess. Having clarity of why you assess in your minds and how it impacts upon your teaching and the learning of your cohort, your learners, is crucial. And I would urge you to go through these questions constantly, week in and week out. And you may find that the answers you give to these questions initially may change later on. And they may not stay the same. They may continue to change. And so what this change is signaling is a reflexive or a reflective attitude to your teaching in the madrasa. So it's constantly changing, constantly engaging with the questions, coming up with answers. And then as you teach, you may go back to these questions again, and via your teaching, you may say, no, that answer was good for me 6 months ago. But as now, where I am in my teaching, that answer doesn't satisfy me. I need to find another one. And you will find, bi'idhnillah, that this process enriches your teaching. So what is assessment for learning? Why do we do it? And here a number of questions are asked. And there are many more questions. I've only given a few. Okay. So there are two parts then to this assessment. There is the learner and there is the teacher. Clarity in our minds as to why we are carrying it out, and clarity in the minds of our learners as to what they are meant to be doing with the assessment tasks they are given, and how the assessment tasks will be assessed. So when learners know and understand these principles, the quality of learning will improve. Sharing this information with learners will promote ownership of the learning aims and a sense of shared responsibility between the teacher and the learner to achieve those aims. Now, I've always been convinced that learning and teaching within Islam are not individual closed off activities. Learning within Islam has always been a community-based activity. We may learn something, but the height of that learning is not only implementing that learning in our lives, but sharing that knowledge as well. And so here, what I'm talking about in this slide is promoting a shared ownership of the learning process, so that the learners feel that when they come into the classroom, okay, they are not only there to be spoken at. They come into the classroom and they understand that their position within the learning process is one which drives it forward. It's a central position. It's one that without them, learning cannot take place. The learning process is devoid of any meaning. And so by sharing with the learners the learning aims, the lesson plans, the schemes of work, the assessment criteria, now the learner begins to understand or gain a better appreciation of their role within the whole learning framework. Let me give you an example, if I may, before I finish, because I've got a number of slides here, and given the time, I realize I'm not going to get through them all. But I wanted to prepare them for you, because usually what I'm asked is, can I share the slides with students, and I'll make them available to you. But I want to mention this point, which I find very important as it relates to what we're discussing, and that is assessment. We as teachers within the madrasa are never the finished article. We are never the finished article. There is always room for improvement, okay? And one of the avenues, or one of the pillars, one of the aspects which assists in our improvement as teachers is knowing the needs of our learners. If we separate the needs of learners from their learning process, then I think we are not seeing them for who they are. The learners that we engage with do not come into the classroom devoid of their personal biographies. So give your example. When you've entered into learning, have you left your being male, you're being a father, you're being a brother, you're being female, you're being a mother, you're working as a doctor, you're working in the shop, at the door, and said, here I am, devoid of all these characteristics which make up who you are? Well, if you have, then, you know, that's a different discussion. But in all the years I've been teaching, I've never come across an individual who has been able to strip all those characteristics from themselves and enter into the classroom as an empty vessel. Likewise, our learners, our young boys and girls, you know, those cheery, smiling individuals who are fidgeting in their seats, who are playing with certain things, who are engaging in discussion which has nothing to do with the lesson. They also do not come into the classroom devoid of their personal biographies, what happened to them at home the previous night, what they had for breakfast, their brother passing his driving test. They don't come as empty vessels. That's the point I'm trying to make. Because they do not come as empty vessels, we need to see them as a whole. We need to see them in a holistic manner. And by seeing them in a holistic manner, trying to understand who they are, where they come from, the needs which they present within the madrasa, within the individual session that we are taking them for, where we have half an hour, 45 minutes, or if we're fortunate enough, an hour with them. If we do not understand the needs which our learners present with regards to the learning process that they're engaging in, all the assessment that we set for them is null and void. It is an assessment which is constructed not to empower the learner, not to engage the learner in a process where they can develop confidence and self-esteem, but it is now a process which is devoid of instilling confidence, devoid of instilling self-esteem, devoid of imparting motivation to those learners, because it's created in a vacuum. So when we assess, it is not about drawing up a paper with a number of questions and then giving it to the learners so that they can ask those questions. There are many steps, one of the points I want to convey. There are many steps that we have to employ, that we have to go through before we are effectively able to assess our learners. And we cannot strip our learners of their lived life experiences that they bring into the madrasa. If we did, then that, I believe, goes against the Islamic ethos which the Quran, Rasul A'zam, and the A'imma Athar have laid down clearly for us. And if I had time, I would go into that in much more detail, which I don't. Okay. So I've got 6 minutes left of the time that is allocated. In the PowerPoint presentation that I put together for you, there's a section with regards to teachers, question learners.
Sorry, Aga.
Mhm.
Based on last training sessions feedback, so this time we have allocated more time for the teachers as suggested by the trainers and many participants. So 1 hour really wasn't enough. So today, this session is up to 3:30.
Okay, and so what is the time now?
Hopefully that will,
Okay, so
okay, I did mention
we have.
beginning. Hopefully that will help.
Oh, that's great.
Thank
Okay,
you.
so now then, over to you. MashaAllah. Aga Mathan, I'm so grateful for you to mention that. So now over to you, class. There is an ayah in the Quran. There is an ayah in the Quran which I would like you to find. And it focuses on this idea of the student not being an empty vessel and how students are assessed by the teacher, by the murabbi, by the individual who is imparting knowledge to them. Okay. Before I give you the ayah or ask you to search for the ayah and then feed back on it, I just want to make sure that you're all here. So can I get a number 1 that tells me you are all in the class, please? Number 1. And just type number 1 in the public chat. Okay. Okay, so far, I've got a few of you. So does it mean that the rest are actually not here? So in reality, we have only 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Oh, we've got 10 people, 11 people. Okay, so 12 and 13. Okay, so 13 out of 18, that's not bad. And obviously I subtract myself from it. There is an ayah in the Quran. There is an ayah in the Quran, and I want you to find it, please. And it mentions that if the Prophet had been hard-hearted, then the people would have fled from around him. Does anybody know the surah name? Does anybody know the ayah number? And if you had have been hard-hearted, then the people would have fled from around you. Does anybody know the surah name? Does anybody know the ayah number? Silence. Can I
Is it Surah Ali Imran?
Ali Imran, and which ayah?
I think, not sure, maybe 150 around that area.
Maybe? Okay. So you're not sure. And do you know what the ayah actually says?
It was that if you were lenient, or people would have disbanded from you. If you were not lenient, if you weren't lenient with them, or if you had been rude to them or harsh, then people would leave you. So ask for their forgiveness.
Ask for forgiveness of them. Yeah?
Yeah, is that right?
Okay, but we want the exact words. We want the exact words for this ayah. But thank you very much for that feedback. You're absolutely correct, but we want the exact words. Can somebody give the exact words?
Assalamu alaikum.
Walaikum salam.
Yeah, is it this one? فَبِمَا رَحْمَةٍ مِّنَ اللَّهِ لَنْتَ لَهُمْ وَلَوْ كُنْتَ فَظًّا غَلِيظَ الْقَلْبِ لَانفَضُّوا مِنْ حَوْلِكَ فَاعْفُ عَنْهُمْ وَاسْتَغْفِرْ لَهُمْ وَشَاوِرْهُمْ فِي الْأَمْرِ فَإِذَا عَزَمْتَ فَتَوَكَّلْ عَلَى اللَّهِ إِنَّ اللَّهَ يُحِبُّ الْمُتَوَكِّلِينَ.
MashaAllah, Masuma. Excellent. Can we get a translation for that? Can somebody cut and paste the translation for that? Wow, that's brilliant. Thank you very much. Who can read this, please?
Can I read it, Sheikh?
Thank you very much, Khani.
Okay, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Thus, it is a mercy of God that thou art lenient unto them. Had thou been severe and hard-hearted, they would have surely have dispersed away from around thee. Therefore, forgive them and seek pardon for them and take their counsel in the affair. But when thou art resolved, then put thou thy trust in God, for God loves those who trust in him. Sadaqallahu al-Ali al-Azim.
MashaAllah. Should not this be our slogan? Look what Allah Azza wa Jal is saying to Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sallam. Allah Azza wa Jal is detailing the characteristics of Rasulullah A'zam sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sallam. Why Allah Azza wa Jal sent this one, Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sallam, to the people he sent them. and how Rasul A'adam sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wasallam engages with them. And because of the engagement that he has with them, the benefits which these individuals, they take from that. Okay, so Allah Azza wa Jal mentions, and it's because of the mercy, it's because of the mercy of Allah Azza wa Jal that you, Muhammad, sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wasallam, linta lahum, you're lenient with them. Yeah? And your disposition is, if you had have been hard-hearted, or if you had have been harsh with them and hard-hearted, what would have happened? They would have run away from you. Okay, they would have left you, because how you taught, how you imparted the knowledge, how you conducted yourself as the Murabbi, as the Rasul sent to guide humanity via putting words of the Quran into practice, people would have run away from you. So what must you do? Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wasallam, you must pardon them. You must pardon them over and look over their shortcomings. What else must you do for them? You should seek forgiveness for them, Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wasallam. And you should consult them, ask them questions, understand who they are, get an understanding of what's going on in their minds. When you want to carry out an action, ask them, so that they can feel that they are part and parcel of the process. And then when you have decided something, then rely on Allah Azza wa Jal. Why? Because the love of Allah Azza wa Jal is situated with a group of people. And that group of people are those who rely on Allah Azza wa Jal. For myself, this is where our teaching should be. And the best example in human form which we have of a teacher is Rasul A'adam sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sallam. Okay, have this ayah in your mind. Now, is there an ayah in the Quran which mentions that the Prophet was sent to purify the people as well as to teach the Quran? And that surah may be named after a day of the week. That surah may be named after a day of the week.
Surah Juma.
Surah Juma. And which ayah, Khanumi Roxana, details the methodology adopted by the Prophet to bring the people to the haqq, to bring the people into yaqeen, into clarity, into certainty? Which ayah? Agha Maitham, Khanami Masuma, Khanami Asiya Shah, Khanami Sadia Nabeem, Khanami Farah Jafari, Khanami Safiya Salim, Sayyidah Fatima, Khanami Bilqis Hamdani, Khanami Najma Zaidi.
Is it the second ayat?
Which is that?
Let me just read it from here, Surah Juma. Sorry, so it is. The translation comes as, He it is who raised among the inhabitants of Makkah an apostle from among themselves, who recites to them his communications and purifies them and teaches of wisdom, book and the wisdom, although they were before certainly in clear error. Is it that one?
Ahsant. And can we have the Arabic from anybody? Can we have the Arabic from anybody? Can somebody cut and paste it? Sayyid Hassan. Can we have the Arabic from anybody? And I want to draw these two ayats together to give you an understanding of how I approach assessment. Can we have the Arabic reading, and can we have a cut and paste of the English of this ayah? Bismillah. Oh, that is good. So who is going to read this ayah? Khanum Sakina, are you going to read the Arabic?
Okay, I'll read it again.
Mashallah.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. هو الذي بعث في الأميين رسولا من يتلو عليهم آياته ويزكيهم ويعلمهم الكتاب والحكمة وإن كانوا من قبل لفي ضلال مبين.
Thank you very much. شكرا جزيلا. هو الذي بعث في الأميين رسولا منهم يتلو عليهم آياته ويزكيهم ويعلمهم الكتاب والحكمة وإن كانوا من قبل لفي ضلال مبين. Remember, we're looking at assessment. There is a previous ayah from Ali Imran, Surah Ali Imran we looked at, talking about disposition of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. No, the noise was perfect. It's family, you know. I had my children running around earlier on, so it's not an issue, okay? The English is Huwa alladhi, he it is, Allah Azza wa Jal it is, who raised up amongst the Ummiyin, the people of Makkah, not unlettered, the people of Makkah, a Rasul minhum, of their own, from amongst them. Yatlu alayhim ayatihi. He is reciting to them his ayats. Wa yuzakkihim, and purifying them. وَيُعَلِّمُهُمُ الْكِتَابَ وَالْحِكْمَةِ, and he is teaching them the kitab, the Quran, and the hikmah, the sunnah. Okay? وَيُزَكِّيهِمْ وَيُعَلِّمُهُمُ الْكِتَابَ وَالْحِكْمَةِ وَإِنْ كَانُوا مِنْ قَبْلُ لَفِي ضَلَالٍ مُبِينٍ. However, before this, they were in ضَلَالٍ مُبِينٍ, clear, manifest error. Now, ikhwa wa akhawat, brothers and sisters, look at the disposition, look at the role of the Prophet in this ayah. What does he do? What is he doing? He is delivering a message. He is purifying as well. I'm going to say this. This role that we have as teachers in the madrasa is the exact same role. Definitely we are on a lower level, but if we look at our role in the true manner in which it's intended, and that is to bring peace, harmony, kindness, love, compassion to the hearts of our students, then this is the manner in which we have to behave, linked to the previous ayah. Bring these two together, and we have the foundation upon which we build our teaching. If this is the case, then how should we engage with assessment? If this is the foundation, this purification, this being kind, this being compassionate, this asking Allah Azza wa Jal to forgive the sins of others, as has been mentioned in the previous ayah. Okay? Bringing people out of darkness into light. Then how do we engage with not only assessment for learning, not only crafting our learning plans, not only crafting our session plans, not only engaging in what we would call classroom management, not only engaging with the parents who bring their children to the school, to the madrasa. If this is the case, then how, if we're going to choose just one of them, how do we engage with assessment? If this is how we are asked to teach and deliver knowledge to our students. This is a question now that we are going to look at for the remainder of our time together. Over to you. Over to you.
Salam, ya Sheikh.
Alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Sheikh, I feel like that being a madrasa teacher here, and then also having our this center, Islamic center together. So we often meet the teachers and students. So we don't remain just teacher and student relationship in the four walls of a madrasa classroom. We extend even to our Islamic centers. When we meet our students, we still are in contact with them. We still like see each other's like behavior and like that. So it's extended even outside the classroom, the teaching and all.
Alhamdulillah.
Alhamdulillah.
Alhamdulillah. And so it speaks of being a role model, doesn't it? And Aga Matham mentioned we shouldn't be strict. I've heard some people say learning takes place when the teacher is strict. This is not the way of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sallam. Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sallam, as we're seeing with the ayats, located his teaching, assessing, understanding what is needed of his ashab within love, within compassion. And once he understood what was needed, then he delivered exactly what the individuals required to move them out of this dalal, this error, into the nur, into the light, into the haqq. Remember this idea, before we can assess, we need to know who we are assessing. And so our disposition, the way we behave, the way we engage with them needs to be such that we can extract that knowledge about them. Anybody else would like to comment, please?
Akhlaq of teachers matters a lot, because if we are not practicing ourselves, then how can we like deliver the thought behind our teachings?
That is a huge, how do you see that in reality when we look at ourselves and we look at all the faults that we have? How do you see that? Do you see it as something that we can never do? Do you see it as something that's going to take time and we can work towards? How do you engage with that huge responsibility?
I guess we should first check ourselves that we are doing our wajibats or not. Like first check for first self-assess ourselves.
Asant.
Yeah.
Keyword, yes, exactly. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And then put ourselves into practice, so we can we can impart from us, like how Rasulullah did it. First he practiced, he showed the ways by practicing, and then people were so impressed by his lifestyle that people started following him. So we should apply it to ourselves first, and then the students will grasp from us.
Inshallah. Excellent. Thank you very much. Yes.
Let's say that we should be the role model for the students.
Okay. And what does being a role model for the students mean, Khanme?
I should say we have our role models, like sister said, Professor Sam alayhi salam and the Ahlul Bayt alayhum salam. So we just don't teach them about them and their biographies or lives. We should try to also live follow them. So when the students see us how we are doing practical what we say in theory, the students automatically will start to do so the same, follow.
Inshallah,
Yeah,
inshallah.
inshallah.
Remember, let's go back to this before I hand over to somebody else to share their insight. Remember, the first ayah which we looked at, it mentioned something about the characteristic of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wasallam. The children should not be afraid to come to the madrasa. The children should yearn to come to the madrasa. The children should feel that when they're in the madrasa, in your company, they're in the company of somebody who not only can teach them, but loves them for who they are as a human being. Somebody who they can feel safe with, somebody who they know has their best interest at heart, because ikhwa wa akhawat fillah, because my brothers and sisters in Islam, we are not only teaching those children in front of us. Those children will grow up to have children themselves. And those children that they have will have children, bi'ithnillah, also. We are teaching generations. We should see in front of us that that child represents the next generation and the generation after that. So understanding that, what is our responsibility? How do we engage in teaching? How do we construct our assessment tasks when it comes to our learners? Over to you. Over to you for further feedback. Yeah, please go ahead.
Yeah, these I must say that these verses and these are amazing in showing how the teachers should do. And some of the things that I've noted is, for example, in the first one, Allah is saying that that like part of it is and instructing them in the book and the wisdom. So it means that the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he was instructing them about Quran, about the different information in the Quran, as well as he was also giving them the wisdom, which means that if we look in the similar manner, the teacher can teach about the subject, but he or she can also do the tarbiyah aspect of like he or she can develop their personality in addition to the subject that is being taught.
Yeah, mashallah, Sayyid, alhamdulillah. And do we see then the role that we have as teachers, the impact that we have? I will give you some personal experience, okay, if you don't mind. Both of my children attended madrasa, alhamdulillah, from an early age. From when they could attend, they went, and even before that, they were blessed to attend nurseries that were run by our idaras, okay? And when they went to madrasa, it was just like a seamless move. And they went through the years. My son had a teacher of Quran, and I'm not sure what had happened to their relationship, but it totally broke down. And my son didn't want to stay in that lesson when he was being asked to read the Quran. He felt that not only wasn't he learning, but the attitude of the teacher wasn't correct. And when he would come home, he would explain to me, Baba, I can't sit in that lesson. His interest in the Quran started to wane and go down. And I had to do something, okay, because teaching our children Quran is a wajib on us. It's part of their legacy as being Muslim, as being followers of Madhab Ahlul Bayt. It's a duty on us as parents to do so. And so I said, okay, Malish, Mohammad, don't worry. You don't need to go to that class. Obviously, he had other classes, and now, mashallah, he's proficient in his Quran reading. But if I take that example, and let's say there's another child who doesn't have the resources at hand to go elsewhere and learn Quran reading, or the parents said, no, you have to stay in that class, and then that attitude, the breakdown between the teacher and the student gets bigger. What would be the association? What would be the relationship developed between the learner, the student, and the Quran itself? I think it would be a very poor relationship. So going back to what you've said, and this is picking up on what all of you have said, the responsibility that we have as teachers in the madrasa, personally, it is like no other responsibility had by any other teacher, whether it's in school, whether it's in college, whether it's in university, okay? Yes, the responsibility in the madrasa and in the hawza are comparable, but obviously the hawza is at a higher level. But in the madrasa, we are working towards molding a character. We are working towards enriching a character. And if we work in a way in which we pour cold water into the hearts of the children, it doesn't matter how good we are as teachers, what knowledge we have, how impressive we are in our assessment criteria, putting together lesson plans, writing reports on students, putting together schemes of work. If we are working in a way which pours cold water into a student's heart, then we don't belong in the madrasa. We belong elsewhere. The madrasa is for individuals who are going to love the child and be compassionate towards the child. That's the starting point. Everything else is secondary. You can acquire knowledge later on, okay? But if you don't engage in the madrasa with a understanding of love for the madrasa itself, care and compassion for the students, then why are you there? In my mind, you don't belong there. Let's have a final sum up from one of you, and then our time is up, and we can hand over to the organizer. Let's have a sum up from one of you, please. Take the microphone, please. Whether you've remained silent throughout the session, it doesn't matter. Take the microphone and sum up everything. Well, not everything, obviously, but give us a summing up statement, please.
Assalamu alaikum, Sheikh. I just wanted to add something actually just to these two ayats that you had mentioned, and it just made me really understand something my teacher had said to me because I'm doing Iman and Akhlaq lessons, and Sheikh Isa from the Islamic Center, I've said to him that I felt at a disadvantage because I wasn't Hausa trained, or I hadn't been taught in the Hausa. I've just been learning on my own basis. And how would I teach Iman and Akhlaq? And he said to me that the students would learn the role of Iman by how I acted with them, and I had to be a tangible example myself. So my reaction, the way I delivered as a mu'min, I could just teach them through that. And just these two verses have really embodied that, and now really made me understand what he was meaning as being a tangible example myself. So Jazakallah so much for sharing those.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for that insightful feedback. I don't just mean that thank you very much. I mean, thank you very much for everybody who has fed back, either verbally or has written their feedback in the public chat. To conclude then, if you don't mind, there is so much that we need to be exposed to as madrasa teachers, and that exposure can only make our practice as educators richer. And as I mentioned when we began the session, there is a wealth of literature now being translated from Arabic into English, or Persian into English, or Farsi into English, which touches on a pedagogy or an andragogy, Islam's approach to pedagogy, Islam's approach to andragogy. There is a clear and detailed methodology within Islam as to how teaching is conducted and what attributes or characteristics the individual teacher needs to work on developing whilst they are engaged in the process of teaching. If you are not able to find those resources, please let me know via say Maytham or the other organizers, and I will make whatever resources I have available to you as well. So you can see not only within, let's say, the Sunni madhab, but within madhab Shia, there is a rich wealth of resources on teaching and the disposition of the teacher and how a meaningful engagement with learners is carried out. And in concluding, I'm going to thank all of you because of your attendance and also your engagement with me. I really appreciate the insight that you've given me in your feedback. Those of you who have remained silent, don't worry, bi'idhnillah, next time you'll be able to engage verbally. And finally, again, congratulations to Majlis Ulama Shia Europa for organizing these sessions. It signals a commitment to the madrasa, which bi'idhnillah Allah Azza wa Jal will repay for them both in this life and in the next life. Shukran jazilan. Assalamu alaikum.